Hello, everyone. You are joining into the Connecting to New Funding Opportunities session. You want to go ahead and uh, put in the chat, say hi, let us know you're there, let us know where you are joining us from. We'd love to hear from you. We'll just wait a little bit until people start popping into our session. It's saying we are live. So again, as you join, hey Allison, as you join, if you could just say hi in the chat, let us know where you're joining us from. Also, while we wait, if you haven't had a chance yet, you might want to stand up. Oh, I'm gonna shake my arms and move my neck. It's been a great day, and I just sort of need to stretch out. Oh boy, that was a crink. Um, let's see, I'm going to also take some water. Please make sure you're hydrating yourself. Awesome. Okay, looks like people are joining. Again, have your sound on, get that connected. And let us know in the chat where you're joining us from. As you're getting oriented, you might want to check out the polls tab at the top. You can put your questions for this session either in the chat or in the polls. Up there as well are file tab, any attachments, the PowerPoint, a copy of the PowerPoint in a PDF version is there. And also in the people, you can see who is joining us. All right. We have lots of people from California. Alaska is in the house, definitely. All right, let's go ahead and get started. Again, if you're joining us as we're sort of rolling through the beginning slides, just let us know where you're joining us from. It just helps us to sort of understand a little bit about the audience that we're talking with. You are joining the Connecting to New Fundings opportunity. Welcome. Let's go ahead and take a moment to get disclaimed.
This presentation was produced under U.S. Department of Education contract number GS00F115CA with Synergy Enterprises, Inc. The views expressed herein do not necessarily represent the positions or policies of the U.S. Department of Education. No official endorsement by the U.S. Department of Education of any product, commodity, service, or enterprise mentioned herein is intended or should be inferred.
All right. Now that we've been disclaimed, we'd just like to introduce ourselves to you. Aloha, I am Olani Lily with the Office of Indian Education Technical Assistance Team. I'm a member of the team. I'm proud to be a member. It's been an honor to have the opportunity to work across Native American and Alaska Native communities. I currently I've always resided in Hawaii and have worked both within immersion charter school as well as culture-based education. It's great to see everyone here from New Mexico, Wisconsin, Massachusetts, Idaho, Alaska is definitely in the house. Let's meet our other presenters.
Tanake Harura. My name is Brittany Shulman. I'm Wakma Suan originally from North Carolina, but I reside on Leech Lake Reservation with my husband's family and our 2 children. I'm the Vice President of Indigenous Leadership and Education Programs with Native Americans in Philanthropy, and I'm very happy to be here.
Thanks, Brittany.
Good afternoon. My name is James Henry, and I am an economic development specialist with the Office of Indian Economic Development. And my duty station is actually in Palm Desert, California, which is the traditional homes of the Cahuilla bands here. There's a number of bands throughout the valley here. And I'm originally from Northern California. I'm a citizen of the Enterprise Rancheria. And I'm looking forward to our discussion today.
Good afternoon. My name is Dennis Wilson. I'm the Grant Management Specialist with the OIED program. I'm stationed at Albuquerque, New Mexico, where I reside with my wife and 2 kids. We're enrolled members of the Taos Pueblo in northern New Mexico, which we're trying to dodge the fires here that's rolling through our state. I'm also by way of Crow Agency, Montana. So I'm a Haskell baby. So yeah, I'm also excited about our discussions today and can't wait to provide information. Thank you.
Great. Thank you again for agreeing to present and to share what's going on with your organizations. Also, we do have some information from Nicholas Emmons. He's not able to be with us today, but he did provide us some information from the Indian Land Tenure Foundation. And so I'll be sharing that with you towards the end of this presentation. Okay, so for today, what some of our objectives are to first get an understanding of recent trends as it relates to nonprofit funding, to look and identify strategies to maintain or even increase donations or funding, as well as to identify potential new sources of funding. Boy, so, I know you folks have been in the struggle as it relates to the funding landscape, both during the pandemic and now as we face new challenges with the economy. What we've seen, there was a study done in November of 2021 by the National Council for Nonprofits. That report is called The Data Shows What We Know. The Nonprofit Helpers Need Help. What they're finding is that more than 75% of nonprofits that responded to this study in August of 2021 indicated that demand for their services has increased compared to, of course, pre-pandemic levels. Also, almost 45% noticed a decrease in their ability to meet those needs, particularly in underserved communities, including Native communities. While the need continues to increase, nonprofit serving these underserved communities are finding it difficult to get funding to meet the demand. Also, I'm sure you're well aware that expenses have increased for nearly 3/4 of the responding organizations. That's what they identified, and really through inflation and where the economy is. We all see that whether it's paper, supplies, or transportation, moving students around, getting food to those who need food, all of those expenses have increased. And sort of on the other end is that, there's definitely challenges around staffing. Staffing levels are down. More than 40% of the nonprofits that participated in this report indicated that they are losing staff. It is difficult to find staff, and so that has been an additional challenge. Also, as it relates to individual donations and corporate donations are down for nearly half of the nonprofits. And this has been really impacting smaller organizations. And these are nonprofits that have a operating budget of $500,000 or less. There have been really, their funding as it relates to both donations, foundation money, and corporate donations has been significantly impacted. A bright spot, there is a bright spot, is that, well, there's been many bright spots, but in this report, it calls out a bright spot around government funds being increased nearly 60% of those nonprofits that were participating in the study indicated increased access to federal funds. What's not here is that, again, I mentioned that some of the, for small organizations, they are feeling the impact of foundation contributions being decreased. And a lot of foundations deciding to fund larger organizations and nonprofit organizations. I want to say that what one bright spot that I've seen that the report didn't call out is a lot of the innovations that I've seen with OIE grantees as far as programs and meeting the needs, as well as establishing partnerships and really thinking innovatively as it relates to partnerships and maybe in-kind opportunities. So the really question is what does 2022 look like? Again, the report is saying that, you know, the current dollar donation does not buy as much as it used to with inflation and with, you know, the chain of supply being, I guess, interrupted. Our economy is really struggling, and so it does make it makes it hard for nonprofits to stretch that dollar. Employees in the nonprofit sector are leaving their jobs. You know, definitely they feel overworked and underpaid. And so given an opportunity to maybe go into a corporation or larger organizations in order to increase their pay, that they're seeing that in the report. As well as, again, like I said, the community need for service continues to increase, particularly in underserved communities, whether that's Native communities and or Native rural communities. I'm wondering, you know, just take a moment, I'm going to take a moment and pause and just sort of look in the chat to see if you folks want to share any of the challenges that you see that you are maybe expecting or experiencing in 2022. Go ahead and share that in the chat, and then I'll come back later and look at some of those comments. So as I did some research around strategies, you know, given this environment as far as funding goes, what are some of the strategies we can look at moving forward? And here are some of the ones I thought that I've heard you folks talk about, as well as maybe are some new ideas. One is to maintain and think strategically about the relationships and partnerships that you currently have. Think about maybe some partnerships that you can identify mutual benefits, whether it's through in-kind services, or maybe even a sharing of a proposal going in to make through a foundation your proposal, or even individual donors more, I guess, I don't know what to say, stand out, and being able to talk about partnerships and how you are working to make and to develop, to address the needs. Through your partnerships can be really appealing for funders, whether they're individual, a foundation, or even corporate. Also, you might want to take this time to review and revise your case for support and fundraising plan. Again, lots of things have changed. I'm sure you are looking at your operating budget and trying to rethink as costs go up, rethink you know, your budgeting and where that money is coming from. And so it's a great time as you're looking and refiguring out your operating budget to look back to your fundraising plan and your case for support, really calling out and communicating what you need. And that sort of brings us to the third bullet here about communicating the current cost of providing much needed services to donors. Really want to encourage you to not shy away from articulating both the increased need as well as the increased cost. Bringing your partners, donors, again, whether they're individual, foundation, corporate, or government, along with you, and communicating the changes that you're experiencing and letting them know what's going on and what their dollar means and equates to impact. Would be really good to maybe rethink in your communication. Also, because again, one of the upsides that we've seen is more government funding, you do want to maybe think both back into your communication or your case, how you want to articulate the leveraging and development of new relationships as it relates to your government funding. So again, with foundations and individuals as well as corporations being asked to give to meet the need, if you can make a case for pairing your government funding and asking them to maybe leverage that funding to fill in some gaps that the government funding was not able to fill, makes often that they're not the only funder in the program. And I think, when even for government funding, they're looking for you to be able to articulate the sustainability funding wise of your program. And so this is another great place to sort of take a pause, relook at the landscape, relook at some of your work that you need to do, and rethink how you want to articulate that out to potential funders, supporters, and partners. I'm going to take a little break and take a look at what we have going on in the chat. Yep. So definitely staffing. What are some of the what are some government for small Native American communities beyond OIE and DOE demonstration grants? Yeah, John. I think, there are kind of hard around small Native American communities. I know a USDA has some money for rural communities. That might be a place to go. Also, sort of like, I want to say the regulars, whether it's the Administration for Native American, USDA, you may want to check out, who else? National Science Foundation, that's a tricky one when you think about traditional ecological knowledge. Allison is talking about the price of gas. Yes, definitely hampering your mobile van program. Let's see. Listing pay at G8 is so low, no one is applying. Grocery stores pay higher. Yeah, there are lots of competition. Also, I think other companies, everybody's facing this staffing shortage, but how do you compete with other benefits, or how do you look at other ways that might not cost money but may be a benefit to your employees? Great, thanks for sharing in the chat. All right, let's get back to our presentation, and Brittany, I'll let you take it over.
Absolutely. So at Native Americans in Philanthropy, we can go to the next slide. We're what's called a PSO, which is a philanthropy serving organization. We don't really see ourselves as a philanthropy serving organization, more that we are attempting to connect our community and be a bridge between the philanthropic sector and our communities who are doing the work. Our mission is to promote equitable and effective philanthropy in Native communities. That includes being able to educate the philanthropic sector, which is inclusive of private foundations, family foundations, community foundations, and individual giving, as well as giving circles. Really educate them on the diversity and complexity of our issues, as well as our resiliency. The fact that we're still here and continue to be here, despite colonization and all the things that comes with it, means that we have answers in a lot of ways, especially when it comes to this pandemic that we continue to be in. We have answers. Our communities have found ways to continue to support each other and to move forward. So that's really what the heart of our work is. And you can move to the next slide. Some of our programs that we are currently underway is our Tribal Nations Initiative. This is really, we're currently in the middle of doing a tour of listening sessions where we're listening to tribal governments and tribal leaders about their interactions with philanthropy. We had one in the Pacific Northwest region, in the West, including Hawaii and California. Our recently just had one in partnership with USET for South and Eastern tribes, and our next one coming up will be in the Midwest, looking at those tribes. to, again, understand what are the needs and also what are the ways that tribes are engaging with philanthropy, whether it's their own personal philanthropies that they are running. We know that we have very few tribes who are doing really amazing philanthropic work that isn't necessarily getting out there, or folks don't really know as much about. And then we have some tribes who have some definite needs that need to be addressed. So our goal is with that program is to build out programming that will support tribes who are engaging in the philanthropic sector by providing grants and funding, and also support tribes who want to get in more on that, who want to have more access to foundations and capital. Our other program that we have is our Native Youth Grant Makers. That is, we have our first cohort of young women for this cohort to really help them understand about this philanthropic sector, what it is and how it works. And they will be growing their leadership skills as well as building, advocating for their own youth programs that they're a part of. We really think demystifying this sector is super important for our young leaders, especially knowing that there really is so much money out there. And a lot of times, particularly with these private foundations, they just need that first relationship. They need to know who to make contact with. And we're constantly trying to make sure that they know that there are people in their area who are already doing amazing work. And another way that we do that, particularly with our Native Youth Grant Makers, is through Native Voices Rising. It is a participatory grant making program. Last year, we gave out $2 million to 88 Native organizations. Our next grant cycle will actually open on the 15th of this month. So you please, by all means, apply for that. And the decision for those funds actually comes from community reviewers who are Native and have been with the program. It's about 10 years old, and we are increasing the amount of funding that is there so that we can continue to provide more grants to folks who are doing amazing work, such as yourselves. We can go to the next slide. So we also engage in reports and resources, knowing that philanthropy is so, not to say stuck, but they're very much centered on the numbers and what is your evidence that there's a problem, or what is the evidence that this actually works? And we have a number of reports, including our Indigenous Community Leadership in Response to COVID-19, our Indigenous Professionals in Philanthropy report, where we looked at the Diversity Among Philanthropic Professionals report put out by Change, and really kind of tried to decipher who's Indigenous in philanthropy, where are they working, and how are we engaging with them. And last, the Indigenous Life course, which is very much a understanding of youth in philanthropy and how they're operating. We do a number of events in partnership with other organizations. I've already mentioned our Tribal Nations Listening Tour. And on the side, it includes our website. You can go list to the events and convenings, and you'll be able to see and register for these different ones. We also have a Remembering Our Sisters, that's with the Center for Native American Youth, and their program that they have, Remembering Our Sisters. We have a Forum Native American Family Resource Center webinar that's coming up. That's another network for family resource centers, which is a really broad sort of network of how people are supporting young people and children. And the other we have is Beyond Land Acknowledgements, Indigenous Leadership in the Environment in Southern California. So we have a number of, like I said, a number of events and convenings where we're continually trying to educate philanthropy on our issues and our diversity and our resilience. And go to the next slide. The last thing that I sort of wanted to highlight is we do have an Investing in Native Communities platform that's actually a partnership with Candid. And in that partnership with Candid, this map was something that came up. The funding map does show grants that are available, that have been given out in different areas. So it's a really great resource if you're wanting to look at who is funding Native people in your area, in your state, in and around where you are. And it's a really great resource for being able to see who's funding and begin to develop those relationships. Because what I have learned from philanthropy, it really is all about those relationships and being able to have conversations with program officers, with executive directors, with CEOs about what you're doing. And you already have everything that you need to be able to tell them, you know, this is who we are, this is what we do, and this is our successes. And being able to create those relationships will increase an opportunity to get more funding. I think that's my last slide, Olani. Thank you so much. If you have any questions, feel free to put them in the chat and we'll definitely get to them.
Yeah. Yeah, so let's see. If you have any questions, you can put that in the chat. We'll just wait a little bit to see if anything pops up. Sometimes it takes a minute. Okay, we have a question. So are we talking about sustainability or maintainability? That was a question, and then it goes on to explain, for smaller Native communities to break out, would it be feasible for a single organization to aggregate education needs for funding opportunities? This may be happening already. I would welcome suggestions. Any thoughts on that, Brittany?
One of the things we at Native Americans in Philanthropy have been advocating for is when foundations are investing in Native communities, that they do not tie that funding to specific programming, that they create it as general ops, so that you have the flexibility and freedom to be able to determine how those funds should be used. And I would encourage, if you are looking at foundations and you're looking, especially private foundations, family foundations, as much as possible, be able to articulate, we would like general operations funding so that we can continue to support our communities as we see fit.
Great. Thank you. All right, we will move on to our next presenter. Again, I want to encourage you to put your questions in the chat. At the end of this next presentation, we will be going back and checking the chat for questions. All right. Okay, go ahead.
Right. This is Jim Henry again. And so we're going to give a high-level overview of the programs that are offered in the Division of Economic Development. Next slide, please. And here's just a basic agenda. And again, if you have questions, go ahead and put them in the chat. We're going to give an overview of the Division of Economic Development. We're going to provide a little focus on the Living Languages grant programs that we have, because a lot of people are interested in the living language programs overall. And then we're going to go over the other funding sources which individuals may be interested in applying for, and then have a question and answer session if need be. Next slide. And one more. It's one of those slides that you have to keep hitting return and it finally pops up. So we just wanted to give a high-level overview of the different funding opportunities that we have throughout the years. We have what is called the Native American Business Development Institute. And again, I'll be covering these in a little more depth later on, but just to give you an overview of what we'll be covering. We have a Tribal Tourism Grant Program. We have the Living Language Grant Program. We have the National Tribal Broadband Grant. And we have the new program, which is called the Indian Business Incubator Program, or IBIP. Next slide. So living language, everybody is interested in living language. How are we going to preserve and protect our languages? And so for this program, funds are provided to federally recognized tribes and tribal organizations. And it's to deliver native language instruction, immersion programs, and to build tribal capacity to create and expand the preservation of those languages. We know a lot of times, and this really hit everybody really hard with the pandemic. We lost a lot of elders, and the languages some of them are very barely holding on. So the purpose of this grant is to help those tribes be able to maintain their language and decide what's going to work for them within their community to build up the skill level of everybody when it comes to their traditional languages. Next slide. So in 2020, 55 living language grant programs were received, and of those 18 were funded, which represented about $3 million. And the grants ranged from 100,000 to 200,000. We just closed the funding announcement for this year. Those applications are being reviewed, and we will be able to notify those tribes who have been awarded funds very soon. And this program, usually every year, we have an announcement for funding. And we normally have the information on our website when these funds become available. Next slide, please. NABD, or Native American Business Development Institute. Again, this provides funds to federally recognized tribes. And it's for those tribes to hire a consultant to actually conduct the economic feasibility study. You know, a lot of times folks have ideas, you know, will this work for our tribe? Will this work for our tribe? Or we need some new ideas on what's going to work for our tribe. So with these funds, individuals can actually hire a consultant to do all the groundwork on that and present the information to leadership, and then leadership can decide if this is something they want to move forward on. Next slide. And a good example of NABD. I was thinking, we was told we could add a little things that we didn't include. So a good example of one awardee was the Heidelberg Corporation in Alaska. They wasn't awarded a feasibility study grant for approximately $35,000. And what they did was they wanted to see if they could actually open up a cafe and laundromat in their community. You know, it's something that's needed. Everybody has to do their laundry. Everybody needs to eat someplace once in a while at a nice place. And after they finished their feasibility study, they said, hey, we want to do this. You know, it looks good for our community. We just need to find the funding. So what they did was they used the feasibility study, and they actually applied for a HUD grant for, I believe, $600,000. And they was actually able to build their cafe and laundromat and hire approximately 5 or 6 local natives to actually work there. And it's been very successful. They're happy that they pursued this. So that's a good example of a nice success story. You know, they had an idea, they had a thought, they had a consultant come in and actually do the feasibility study, and they use that then to support their application for the construction of the actual building. So yes, I wanted to share that with you. We also have the Tribal Tourism Grant Program. And this is a fairly new program. The Native Act, which was approved in 2016, basically was looking at tourism within Indian country. And so as a part of those funds, we actually have this Tribal Tourism Grant Program, which is for federally recognized tribes and tribal organizations. And again, it's to hire a consultant to conduct a tourism feasibility study and to develop a tourism plan. And this ranges from, you know, people just wanting to set up a small business, you know, as individuals visit tribal lands, you know, they need a place to eat. So do we want to have a place where we can have, as one person said, we want to have food trucks here, you know, and the closest food truck to the reservation is like 200 miles away, you know, so it's things like that. The other thing with the tourism grants is individuals look at how can they actually maintain their traditions and cultures without all the tourists coming in and picking up everything and taking everything back to their homelands. You know, how do you protect the sacredness of the lands? So things like that. Next slide, please. the Indian Business Incubator Program, or IBIP. It was created to establish and operate business incubators that serve entrepreneurs that will provide products and services to tribal reservation communities. This is a completely new program. And again, it's looking at startup or early stage businesses. Next slide, please. To be eligible for the program, you either need to be a federally recognized tribe, tribal organization or nonprofit, or an institute of higher education. And the requirements for this 3-year program is that there will be a match, which is 25%. And they must provide services, and they must actually have a place where these services can take place. You can't use the funds to actually build a building. You actually have to have the building in place. So they're looking at assessing the capital, business, education, counseling, networking, mentorship, the physical workspace. They have to have equipment, they have to be connected, internet, etc. And they must report out on the businesses created or maintained. And those applications are currently open. And Dennis, do you recall when the deadline is for that? June?
IBIP closes on June 17th. It's a Friday.
June 17th. So folks still have time to look at that. And if they're interested, submit the application. Next slide, please. The National Tribal Broadband Grants. Again, these are for federally recognized tribes to explore or extend their broadband services. We currently manage 31 of these grants that were funded in 2020. There were no funds available in 2021. And then, and part of the reason is that the National Telecommunication Information Administration, that's a mouthful there, received a lot of funds for broadband. We will be, it seems, releasing a funding opportunity later this year for some broadband grant funds. So look for that coming out in the future. Next slide. How to apply for these grants. So all of these grant applications are accepted under the grants.gov process. Individuals need to enroll into grants.gov so that they can receive automatic notifications when we release funding opportunity notices. And for information on how to fund that, there's a link there that walks you through it. It's a pretty simple process. And everything is actually submitted through grants.gov, and then that information is sent over to us. Next slide, please. As we were looking at, the applications that were received, we started seeing some trends, and it was determined by leadership that we actually need to have a technical assistant pilot program. And part of this, as indicated earlier, small tribes just don't have the resources. So to help tribes with the actual application process, pre-application training, business development plan, grant writing. Another part of this pilot project, we'll be looking at sustainability. How are tribes, tribal organizations, Native Hawaiian organizations who are interested in tourism, how are they going to sustain the activities that they're doing? Our feasibility studies are like the first step, but as you move forward, how are you going to sustain those? So that's part of this technical assistant project, is looking at opportunities for that. Another benefit is that we will be having an annual conference for all of our tribal tourism grantees. This year, because COVID is still out there, I believe we're going to have a virtual session, and I think we're looking at August sometimes, but we will send the word out to all our current tribal grantees to bring them together, to network, talk about what works, what doesn't work, also identify, other barriers that we may be able to assist these grantees with. So we're looking forward to that. This is going to be the first of its kind for us. And for technical assistance, there's a website below. And as I indicated, the NAPI grants and the IBIB grants are currently open. So if you need technical assistance and you're interested, go ahead and click on that and make a connection with our technical assistance providers. Next slide, please. Okay, so here's our website address. And then if you have specific questions about the grant management, and maybe Dennis might say a little bit about the grant management, because he's the person and his assistant is the ones that deal with all of the grant management. Dennis, did you want to say anything about that?
Yeah, Monica Walker, she is our contractor. She's actually a grant management contractor, but she does the same duties, or will be doing the same duties. So her and I will tag team on a lot of stuff. She's going to be separate from the technical assistance contract that we have. That was a few slides ago.
All right, excellent. Thank you. Next slide. Okay, so a comment just before that, we was talking earlier about, resources overall. And in a previous position, I worked with tribes that had consolidated their funds under Public Law 102-477. And that law allows tribes to use up to 25% of their total funding for economic development job creation. So a lot of times, we may not be able to fund anybody or everybody because we don't have a lot of funds, but sometimes look within your tribe to see what other funding opportunities are available. Because sometimes we all know that in Indian country, we get siloed sometimes, and this is our program, and we don't look beyond that wall. But sometimes there are other resources that the tribe already has that you could possibly use for like a feasibility study. So again, always knock on doors, because eventually somebody's going to open it and say, yeah, we have a little money here for that. So I think that's it for us today. So thank you.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you for sharing. Again, I'm going to check the chat and the polls to see. I don't see any questions in the chat right now, and none in the polls. Okay, if you have any questions, you can go ahead and share that or ask in the chat. And then we're going to move on to the Indian Land Tenure Foundation. So the mission for the Indian Land Tenure Foundation is here: land within the original boundaries of every reservation and other areas of high significance where tribes retain Aboriginal interests are in Indian ownership and management, which means really Indian lands in Indian hands. Here are some of the strategies they utilize. Sorry, hold on one second. I'm getting a little, there we go. Okay. To achieve their mission is through the support and development of community-based projects in the areas of education, cultural awareness, economic opportunity, and legal reform. Some of their previous work includes, in the area of education, includes a curriculum called Lessons of Our Land. It was one of the first programs launched by the Indian Land Tenure Foundation after its inception in 2003. This is a K-12 curriculum database with over 250 standardized lessons. It makes it easier for teachers to include Indigenous perspectives in their classroom. There is the link to that curriculum. Also, they have provided professional development programs for teachers. That launched in 2015 as an on-site training program. Since that time, over 5,000 teachers have completed the on-site training with the lessons of our land curriculum, reaching over 40,000 students in 6 states. This professional development program now stands as a standalone online component for teachers looking for more flexibility as they enhance their teaching craft. They also created a educational video game, When Rivers Were Trails, that launched in 2019 and is the first major educational video game to be indigenous led, developed, and funded. It's been said that this video game is similar to an indigenous take on the Oregon Trail video game. To learn more, you can visit this link. Also, at the end of this session, I do have some contact information for Nicholas if you want to contact him about any of these resources. So their current work. The Land Tenure Foundation is pursuing other education-based opportunities. If your tribe land department is interested in funding, you want funding to hire a high school student for a summer internship, you can contact Jim here at ILTF, and he can get you information. Or if you are interested in learning more about their K-12 work or any of their funding as it relates to education, you can contact Nicholas at, you see his email right there at the bottom. So that is the end of our presentation. I want to go ahead and check if there's any questions. All right, looks like nothing so far. Again, you want to go ahead and put your questions in the chat or in the poll section.
So this is Jim again. And I just wanted to let folks know that, RES 2022 is coming up in Las Vegas, Nevada. I think it's the 23rd through the 26th. We will actually have a booth there. So if individuals have questions or they want to talk to staff about our various programs, we encourage them to stop by. Also, we are working with IANTA, American Indian Alaska Native Tourism Association, and they have been working on a needs assessment to determine technical assistance needs within Indian country when it comes to tribal tourism. They will also be at RES 2000. So look for them, they'll be around because tourism, many folks don't know it, but before the pandemic, tourism for Indian country hit a $14 billion mark, and it's big businesses, big tribes, medium tribes, small tribes, small Native American entrepreneurs. And when you look at it as a more global scope, you can see the impact that it has within Indian country. So yes, I just wanted to share that with folks.
Great, thank you. I wanted to ask Brittany a question. I think she had brought it up earlier in her presentation. You had mentioned giving circles. Can you explain giving circles a little?
Absolutely. I am probably not the expert one to talk about them, but I can give my limited knowledge and connect anyone who has any questions to other folks who have more knowledge than me. Giving circles is really about bringing your funding together with other individuals. And from that pool of funding that you create, that group also makes decisions about where that funding should go. So it can be as small as, in folks who have $5, we'll put $5 a month towards something and snowballing that up each month until you have this larger pool of money. Our communities have been doing things like giving circles, not necessarily calling it that way for a long time. We often remind folks in the philanthropic sector that philanthropy is inherently indigenous. Part of our values was redistribution, and that included whether it's a giveaway, a potlatch, a throw, that we had so many ways of ensuring that our community needs were taken care of. And so giving circles are another way in which we ensure that our community's needs are taken care of.
Yeah, that's awesome. I was able, the reason why I kind of know a little bit about Giving Circle, I can't lie, but I was able to create a Giving Circle. And you would think that, you're asking people who have needs, but it's amazing how, just regular normal people will contribute $5 a month to help to support, education. And we really utilize those funds to leverage other fundings. The other thing I think Brittany mentioned is that their grant program is participatory, and really Giving Circles is a form of participatory philanthropy in which the community is engaged in, setting the goals for what they want to fund, looking through whether it's proposals or mechanisms in which they determine who they will fund, and then, the follow-up around really acting as philanthropists. And coming together. And so it's really an exciting practice. Again, like Brittany said, that we've been doing for forever, right? It's embedded in our culture. So I really appreciate you sharing about the Giving Circle, and that you folks actually incorporate participatory philanthropy. It's awesome.
And I just want to follow up James's point. We'll also be at Res and have a booth there, so feel free to stop by. Some of our folks will be there, as well as our conference, which will be in Seattle, June 26th through the 29th. It's Power and Solidarity. We are working with the Asian American Pacific Islanders in Philanthropy for this conference, sort of honoring our shared history with the past 30 years of being founded. So I do want to share that. That's another opportunity, especially if you're in the Seattle area, to be able to network with some funders who are really interested in investing in Indigenous communities. We do also have a virtual component. So if that's something that you don't necessarily can't travel, we do have a virtual component where, again, you can make some of those connections.
Awesome. Thanks for that, for letting us know where we can see you out there, and get in touch with you, other opportunities. All right, it doesn't look like, I'm going to check the poll one more time. Doesn't look like we have any questions popping up. Again, if you want to see the PowerPoint is there in the file section. You can, if you want to see any of the contact information or the links to some of those grant opportunities that are open now, really want to encourage you to go ahead and check out the PowerPoint. If there's no questions, we want to thank you for joining us. Thank you to our presenters for sharing, the work that you're doing in getting funding and resources out there. Talking about resources, I also wanted to say, some of the research and studies at the Native American Philanthropy is really helpful. You might want to look at some of that. You could possibly incorporate that into maybe your needs statement, into other funding sources. So again, thank you all for joining us. And we have our last networking session. And then after that will be our closing for this year's Office of Indian Education Project Directors meeting. So have a wonderful rest of your day. Aloha.